Hello, my name is Reese Gwillick, and I am recording a presentation that I did for the Society of Alternative Learners, aka SAL, entitled Wheels on Campus. Now you might be wondering, why does this speaker in particular have ethos in order to be able to present on this topic? Well, to give you some background information, I happen to have a rare neuromuscular disease called Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, aka CMT. It's a progressive hereditary neuromuscular disease, which means it impacts my peripheral nerves. Now, for those who may be unfamiliar with biology, the peripheral nerves are essentially the wiring in your body that controls your muscle movement. And to put it simply, my nerves are slowly dying. Now, there isn't a cure. It's going to be there for the rest of my life. I have had it since I was about 14, and the degree of disability happens to vary among patients. So some might be very mild, others might be a lot more severe. And there are a wide range of symptoms, from loss of sensation to pain, fatigue, all sorts of nasty stuff. It's 0 out of 10, do not recommend. Tying this in to why my perspective as someone with a disability happens to matter within the greater context of a STEM school, the importance really ties into the fact that the disabled community is a minority voice within STEM. According to the University of Delaware, 10% of STEM undergraduates have a disability. 6% of STEM graduates have a disability, and less than 2% of STEM graduates then go on to get a doctorate. And that's what this graph here represents. It represents while other minority groups like the Hispanic community, the Black community have been doing really well in increasing the amount of representation within the STEM field, the disabled community, along with the Native American community, have been overlooked, and it's more or less been stagnating throughout the years. Within this talk, I really want to focus on the accessibility on campus during COVID. Has it improved? Has it gotten worse? What's changed? The main areas I'll be discussing is the campus center, the Mott building, and the AB building. I won't necessarily be going into specific mechanical engineering labs, although that is my degree field, or anything too specialized, such as perhaps the T-space. I really want to focus on highly frequented areas and areas that are available to me during this pandemic. Now I'm going to add some disclaimers here. I'm only semi-dependent on a wheelchair. Now you might be thinking, wait, hold on. This speaker is lying to me. I promise I'm not. It's actually a myth that wheelchair users are fully paralyzed in the lower extremities. And while some wheelchair users are able to walk, perhaps they're not able to do longer distance walking. Perhaps they could have something that impacts their energy levels so that they might not be able to walk or have consistent movement for an entire day. Any number of factors, or they could be temporarily disabled. So please don't assume. However, if you're able-bodied, not temporarily disabled, permanently disabled, what have you, please don't replicate taking a wheelchair throughout campus, because there are some areas of the disabled community that finds that a little bit offensive, because you are thereby erasing the experiences of people who actually would use a wheelchair, who are actually disabled and have to experience that day to day with your own experiences as an able-bodied person for a limited period of time. So please don't do that. Saves you, saves me. I'm gonna add that disclaimer. And I'm fully vaccinated. Waited my 2-week grace period. Everything was good to go. Submitted it to wellness. I'm golden. Finally, my last disclaimer is that if you find yourself temporarily or suddenly, permanently physically disabled and need elevator access, just make sure you check in with wellness, because they might have to grant you certain specific access to certain elevators in certain buildings that, if you do not have that access, could severely limit what you are able to get to. Now, with this in mind, let's start off at the first building. Now, I actually had high hopes for this building, Campus Center, because it's a relatively newer building, right? I didn't expect to have much trouble. Except when I was getting in, I had to go through the ramps, which are right outside. And you might think, okay, she has the ramps. She'll be okay. But the ramps were barely wider than my wheelchair. So I felt highly claustrophobic getting up this ramp. And once I was able to reach the top, my wheels were mere inches away from the top of the stairs. So I felt as if, with one wrong move, I could go toppling down. And that's not safe for anybody. I was able to hit the button, move on into the building, no problems. But I didn't really feel safe on just what was there and designed to accommodate me. But I made it into the building, and right off the main doors, there's the restrooms. Now here, it was pretty nice. Got my own personal bathroom, hit a button to go in, hit another button on my level to lock the door, have some railings up in order to use the restroom. It was nice, peaceful, easy, not much fuss going on. Quite a nice experience. And once I left the bathroom, of course, because it's COVID, I had to have my hands sanitized. Now, the hand sanitizers were at a wonderful height for me to access, but I kept being amused all day because the hand sanitizer kept landing on my wheelchair gloves. Now, for those who don't know, you actually have to have specialized gloves in order to use a wheelchair. What these gloves do is add extra padding to your hands and provide a little bit more friction so that it doesn't cause extra friction on your hands that would then lead to calluses or other abrasions. So the most I could do, if I didn't want to take my wheelchair gloves off, was to sanitize the tips of my fingers, and that's as clean as I could feel without taking my gloves off. It was quite amusing, but definitely a mild irritant throughout the day. Now I've gotten into the building. I was able to use the restroom, no problem, sanitize my hands. I have to go to wellness in order to get my access, right? Because my access to the entire campus and elevators was revoked until my 2 weeks was done with my verified vaccine card. So I went to wellness. I brought my good friend Lynn. The first thing we noticed was the door is closed with no button in sight for me to open it and no real way for me to motion anyone inside to help a girl out and let me in. So Lynn opened the door for me. We got inside. I was able to use the desk in front of the receptionist. No problem. Nurse Ginger hooked me up, and within about 15 minutes, I was able to have complete access restored to the elevators and anything else I might need. Now, 15 minutes, it's pretty fast. For those who might be thinking, I just got to campus, I have classes soon, what am I gonna do? For me, it only took about 15 minutes. That's because I already had my diagnosis documented with wellness. Nurse Ginger knew my situation. She was able to get on the phone, no problem, help me out. Took about 15 minutes to process. So well done, wellness. Thanks a lot. As any self-respecting college student, once I'm done with wellness, I get hungry and I need coffee. So I go to the C-store with my good friend Austin. Now I brought Austin in the event I needed any sort of help while in the C-store, and for the most part I actually didn't. The aisles were nice and wide, I could turn no problem, I could reach anything on the shelves, and it was pretty okay. Now granted, anything higher, like the hot dog stand or the soda machine or the milkshake machine, I did have to ask help for it, but with the occasional turning around to accommodate well-placed temporary stands that were in my way, I didn't have much fuss. In this picture, it's right outside the C-store and actually in the sunset room. And in the sunset room, I was actually quite happy because there were different tables at different heights that I could easily reel myself up to, ask someone to move a chair or two out of the way, set myself down, relax, study, and prepare for my classes. It wasn't that bad at all. So I was quite happy. Once I was done studying and preparing for my classes, I had to leave the building because I had class in the math building. So I did just that. Except for the fact I noticed that the exit, because as we all know, with the pandemic, there are entrance and exits to control the flow, didn't have the accessible button on my side. So I tried opening the door. It was quite heavy. My disease also impacts the upper body strength that I have. I couldn't do it. Campus security was looking at me like I was going to somehow ram it down. So that was pretty interesting. But no matter what I did, I couldn't get this door open. So I took the risk, wheeled myself over to the entrance side, pushed the button, and let myself out. No problem, right? Except for the fact that there happened to be cracks right outside the doors leading to the outside that my wheels kept getting stuck in. So not only did I have to risk possible cross-contamination by going out the supposed entrance side but the doors had such significant cracks that I kept getting stuck. So, in the continuation of cracks, I did notice that there were other cracks to be seen on campus as well. This one is for the pool. Now, on this day, there were tacos set up on the tent. And at first, I didn't even think I could get any because there's a ton of stairs. So I can't exactly straight shot from the CC down to the tent because there aren't many ramps around. In fact, the only ramps that I found were at the front of the CC. So I had to go down the ramps again, wheel myself over, avoid the cracks, and finally I could get a taco like any other student. All right, I've got my taco in hand. I still need to get to class, which is in the math building. Now this building, I didn't have many complaints. It's pretty nice. But let's talk about the journey first. Now there are two possible ways to get from the CC to the math building. You can go outside or you can use the tunnel. Now outside, immediately exiting the CC, there's a very steep incline. But I can get up, but it takes a bit. And then there's a second very steep hill at the very front of the school that, while highly fun to get down, required assistance to get back up. These ramps outside the math building were much wider and highly easy to access, nowhere near the stairs. So all told, it took me about 4 minutes and 12 seconds from the front of the CUC to the front of the mat without much assistance, which doesn't leave much time to then get to class if you only have 5 minutes, but not bad. Now the second option is the tunnel, and the ride inside is pretty smooth, less inclines. If you want to take that same tunnel to the dorms, you're out of luck because you're immediately hit with stairs. So you have to go all the way back to Sunset, exit those doors to get to the entrance of the dorms. Or exit down the ramp and go to the back of the dorms and try accessing it that way. Same narrow ramps as was in the front, if it's even plowed in the winter, because I use these same ramps even with my cane, and I wish I had pictures for this, but I have gotten very annoyed when I want to use the ramp and there's snow in the way, because through the diligence of the hardworking people who plow the snow, nothing's done about leaving the snow on the ramp. And then once you've crossed this ramp, you still have to cross a stretch of road that isn't as well signposted as is the stretch of road going from the CC to the AB with nice pedestrian crossings. And because of the visibility of the road around you with landmarks in the way, you're kind of guessing if something's going to come up suddenly, and hoping that with your wheelchair, you're not going to be missed. So not as pleasant of an experience as I would perhaps like. Once we get inside the math building is the elevator. Now, my peers and I, freshman year at the dorms, went around campus and named all of the elevators so that we didn't have to continue saying the elevator in X building. We could just say the name of the elevator and everyone was in the know. So this elevator is named Caroline. Caroline is at the very front of the building, doesn't require additional access, very easy to use, the buttons are at a nice height, smooth ride, newer elevator, no problems with Caroline. After the very exhilarating ride down the hill at the front of the school, I was getting pretty thirsty again. So I wheeled myself up to the vending machine. Now this vending machine I noticed was marked as handicapped accessible. And I found this to be pretty much the case. So it was quite nice to be able to slide in my card, access the touchpad, grab my drink from the bottom, wheel myself to the desks, a hint of which you can see here. If I needed to warm something up, there was a separate microwave that was also at a nice height. Very comfortable time, just allowing my heart rate to slow down, take a breath, and wait for class to start. Now you might be wondering, what are we looking at a chair for? And I'll tell you why. I have discussed with my peers who've had arthritis, some sort of back pain, what have you, about these chairs. And we love them because the support that they provide to our backs and the cushioning on our posteriors is highly comfortable for the sometimes 2-hour stretches of time that we have to be sitting for classes for, which is preferable to some of the seating in the A-B, but we'll get to that later. These chairs can also be adjusted from higher to lower, depending on the height of the person sitting down. And if you're like me and in a wheelchair on that particular day, they're on wheels. Move it out of the way if you need to. It'll be fine. Now I got to class, and because of the socially distant nature of where the tables were placed, it was quite easy to navigate. All of these tables, circular gray ones, in one of the main classrooms that also doubles as a computer lab on the second floor of the Mott building. And I wheeled myself up, and I kept hitting my knees. I am 6 foot tall. And for those who don't know, a wheelchair has to elevate your legs so that your feet are not dragging on the ground. You don't want that. But because of this elevated status with my height, I only had about an inch or so of room between the top of my knees and the bottom of the desk. And this meant that in order to get my legs in, I had to tilt my legs, slide it in, tilt it back, hope I didn't bump my knees, and wait. Which, if you keep forgetting because you fidget like I do, means you're gonna continue to bump your knees. But after these experiences in the Mott building, I still had more classes to get to. So that's where the AB building comes in. Now I have a friend who was temporarily disabled and in a wheelchair for a significant amount of a term. And to this day, he still recalls how much he hated the accessibility in this building. So I already knew in the back of my mind that this wasn't going to be pleasant, but I still wanted to see if it really was that bad. Let us thus begin at the journey. Same as last time, the outside in the tunnel. This is my good friend Max. He had to help me because I myself couldn't push myself up the hill on the front of the campus. With his help, it took about 4 minutes and 32 seconds to get from the front of the mat to the front of the AB. But as you're going to see in part 2 of this journey, we still had struggles because of COVID-specific policies. But I'll earmark that for the next slide. Now, if you didn't want to face the dreaded hill at the front of the campus center, then you did have the tunnel. You go right back in through the narrow ramps into the CC, wheel yourself up to the 7 doors. That's the name of the elevators in the CC, because honestly, I got lazy. Wheel yourself to the tunnel, swipe, grant yourself access, hit the button, wheel yourself in, no problem. Rolling, 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 until the tunnel starts getting steeper and steeper and steeper, and you start to sweat because there are these pictures that look very important, and if you happen to fall at the wrong moment, you're going to hit one of those pictures, and steeper until you're done. Whew. And then you still have to, because you're on the first floor, wheel yourself to the elevator named Betsy and get yourself to the floor that your class is on. Now for me, to get from Sunrise to the second floor of the AB without any assistance through this tunnel took about 12 minutes. Now I recorded myself taking the same tunnel all the way down without hitting a single picture. Thank you very much. And it took less than a minute. So thanks for another roller coaster. But I hardly think that's safe. Now, as I said, there's a part 2 to this journey. And this is where the COVID-specific policies come in. Because on the right, you see one of the entrances that are available on the front of the AB building that are on the same level as either the first floor or the second floor of the AB. Because as we all know, the very official entrance of the AB doesn't have a ramp. However, the decision was made that the entrance to be used was the first robotics center entrance. Max and I were tipped off about the fact that there is indeed a handicap entrance on the side of the building that has a ramp with disability parking nearby, easy to access, just had to roll ourselves down. And Max very graciously ran up the stairs and tried my pass. It didn't work. So we tried again, looked at ourselves as the realization hit that we were going to have to go all the way from the front of the AB to the very back just to get to the first robotics center. As I had class in taking time very close. And while we were doing this, we had an entire sidewalk down the length of the building We had some sidewalk to use at the very back, but we had to traverse the parking lot. And when we got there, something striking happened to catch my eye. And that was that the parking spaces nearest the entrance wasn't the handicapped or disabled parking. It was regular parking, which prompted the question of where was the disabled parking. So I took a moment to search for them, and I found it tucked away in the corner with one half of the official image of 2020 parked right next to them, a dumpster. As I contemplated the majestic nature of the dumpster right next to the handicap parking that was nowhere near the first robotics entrance, I still didn't know if I would even be able to get in to the building or if all of our efforts had been in vain. So I tried the door, and yay, something turns out. I had a button nearby. Hit the button, roll myself in, no problem. But I still had to take the journey to find Betsy, swipe my card given to me by Wellness, wait for Betsy, who's kind of slow. I recorded her one time at being about 5 minutes on a busy day. Roll myself in. She's a bit older, but that's why we love her and are also terrified of her. Select what floor I needed on the level of buttons that were actually close to my height. Wait to be dropped off at my floor. And once I had completed my journey to the AB, I still had some time to kill. So of course, might as well use the time to study, right? Now, the second floor of the AB has a lot of these study nooks hidden away in the walls for students to use. That's what you see here on the right. I rolled myself up to the very edge of the table, looked behind me, and realized I was taking about half of the hallway width. Fearful that I might cause a traffic jam, I at least wanted to charge my phone, which it's dual screen, so I kind of use it to take notes during classes. But surprise, surprise, with my extra long 6-foot tall arms, I still can't reach the electrical outlets. So I thought, all right, there are these spaces, right? I can go into one of those. Except there weren't any buttons for me to open the doors, and they were also glass, so I'm not going to wheel my wheelchair right into them to force my way in. And while there was a very kind person inside of this particular D space, as this photo is being taken, who offered to open the door, I myself couldn't get in. So where was I gonna go? I tried one more time on the second floor of the AB to find a study spot, and I found the vending machines because I was getting hungry. Now, these ones were not labeled handicap accessible, but with a little bit of difficulty, I could still use it. Turn around, and lo and behold, I have a very lovely headrest, because that is about as much as it was useful to me. So clearly these study spots weren't working, right? I should just go to the library. And I did. With COVID certain areas were, of course, roped off. So I couldn't prove to you the fact that I can't access every single shelf on the bookshelf, but I could at least experience how nice it was with how distanced all of the tables were. I could wheel myself around freely. And yet I did have some concern for the safety of the librarians working there when I discovered how frequently these untaped down cords were sprawled around across what was available to me in the library, because I myself was not going to wheel myself over, but if someone noticed it and tripped, I shudder to think what might happen. After failing to find a reasonable study spot, I then did have to go to class. And this is in real time what I had to deal with. On the left are the desk and chair combos typically used in classes with undetachable chairs that, by sheer coincidence, because I asked my professor before even getting to campus how accessible his classroom was, happened to have exactly one freestanding desk available that was being used to house hand sanitizer and wipes. Now, my professor was very kind and moved this desk for me to be able to have a better view of the board. But once we realized I still couldn't get my wheelchair through to actually use it, he had to shove the entire row of desks back. And my friend from earlier, I recall an instance wherein the same problem happened, but with those huge 2-student desks instead. And on the right, there was nothing available for me to use. Perhaps if I had turned myself sideways, I might be able to use part of a desk, but there was absolutely nothing on my level to even get to for a desk. Nothing freestanding on the sides either. And while my professor in this classroom was highly kind and waited patiently for me to finish taking notes, because I didn't have a scribe, so I was just taking my own notes. Even though his own provided lecture notes were highly detailed, I still wanted to do something. I was just using my lap. And that was all. And the classroom with the desk seen on the left was on the 2.5 floor. The 2.5 floor is not available with Betsy. There is somewhat of an elevator shaft right next to the ramp, but I couldn't use it. So I thought, how hard could this be? It's just a ramp. Hard, it turns out. I had used my upper body to drag myself along these rails because there was no one around to help me get up. And it wasn't but sheer coincidence that classmates going to the same class happened to be coming up right as I got to the top to wheel me to my class, because I was very tired at this point, that I was even able to get to my class on time. Can you imagine, in an era where we don't want to be near anyone and there was no one around to help, someone trying to get up this ramp with no one around to help? it's hard. What are the takeaways I would like the person viewing this to have? Well, I would like you to keep in mind that there is an entire learning center that has to be furnished, being built right now. You have the opportunity to speak out for better seating that doesn't hurt my back, or that can be moved so that a student with a wheelchair can access the desks. But even then, with a new learning center being built, the current infrastructure isn't always maintained to the best of accessibility. I've gotten stuck in the dorms elevator, named Veronica, we don't like her, my freshman year. And I was almost late because of that. I was exhausted, and I'm sure my friends who had to help me on campus were also exhausted. And there was a certain kindness from my professors and peers. But even with this kindness, there is still a sort of angst as we're reviewing the continuing COVID teaching methods for virtual and hybrid. Because that, aside from other mental disabilities I have going on, has been the most accessible for me. I can do so much more without even needing to ask for a scribe now. I can watch a recording if I'm having a bad day. I don't need to worry about whether or not I can get to a classroom because I can pull up a video on my phone. And I really, really appreciate the dedication that has been put in to making all of this possible from my professors, one of whom I recall reinvented the entire curriculum for his class just to make it virtual. And that is tying into this meme about making you think that while we want to return to this normal of before COVID, are the disabled and chronically ill communities going to be left behind if you take this away from us? I hope not. And I know some people who are disabled and chronically ill can't even leave their house. I most certainly could barely leave my house for the last year because I was considered part of the high-risk group. What is going to happen to us if this is taken away again? It's a thought. A closing statement I would like to make is to bring your attention to this quote here. That happened while I was in the bathroom in the AP, where there's only one accessible stall for the entire bathroom, and I was patiently waiting for the person to be done. I didn't have much choice in the matter, even though I only had so much time during my class's break. My professor was kind about it and waited, but I still only had so much time. Now this person came out, saw me, and while she had no cane, no crutch, no wheelchair, no immediate identifiable thing wrong with her, I still wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she had an invisible illness I didn't know about. I'm not going to judge until she started talking and said, "Oh my God, I didn't know you were in a wheelchair. I feel so bad. I didn't think anyone with a wheelchair even went here. I just used this bathroom because it's closest. Oh my God." Now, it makes you wonder, because at the moment I just wanted to use the restroom and get back to my class, so I nodded in silence and waited for her to go. But if I'm overlooked by someone who doesn't think that the disabled community exists at Kettering, where else am I going to be overlooked? I recall a time when I was trying to bring awareness to the fact that the high-risk group, who were students, wasn't being talked about in any sort of official COVID communication that I read. A secretary of a higher up official at Kettering said, well, why don't you just educate us? Now, I probably was being quite blunt at the time, but if my voice is supposed to educate the officials at Kettering for speaking up for the high-risk group who are students at Kettering, and I know I'm not the only one, would that even matter when, while documenting this project, I heard from faculty and staff who spoke of a former alumnus who had a disease that impacted her bones and had to use a wheelchair, who fought hard to even get those ramps at the front of the CC, to even get any sort of elevator in the dorms. But still, later on, another alumnus had to have her roommate, who had asthma, help her out of the student apartment across the street, and to push her up that hill at the front of the campus every day until her roommate's asthma acted up one day. If even later on there was an incident where the power went out and the people who required that wheelchair had to be carried down from different parts of the AB because there's no other way. If my friend who is temporarily disabled was still, not too long ago, experiencing problems on campus, and even me, who is only semi-dependent and had to only use the wheelchair within the past year or two as my strength has declined, I'm still experiencing problems on campus, then I wonder, how much is my voice going to educate you if the voices of the past are being forgotten? So I leave you with this, a special thanks of different people I wanted to mention. Special shout out Jake Stack for taking photos for this presentation. And then also to bring your awareness to an event, one of our community partners for the Flint community that does a lot of raising awareness of the disabled community. And if you wanted to look this event up, here are the details, the date, the name, the address that you can, of course, look up. We would love to see you there. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.